The morning she chose compassion over her own future began with sirens cutting through the cold air and the sound of her own heart pounding louder than any fear she had ever known, because in that single, irreversible moment, Emily Carter realized that saving a stranger's life would cost her the exam she had worked her entire life toward, and she had no idea that the choice she made on that cracked sidewalk would echo far beyond that day, far beyond her tiny rented room, and far beyond anything she could imagine. Before the story unfolds any further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet power of doing the right thing even when it costs you everything, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, subscribe to the channel for more real, heart-touching stories, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from, because stories like this connect people across the world. Emily was 21 years old and already tired in a way that sleep never seemed to fix, living in a small apartment with peeling paint and a single window that faced a brick wall, working nights at a grocery store while studying during the day, all for one chance to escape the cycle of poverty that had followed her family for generations. Her final scholarship exam was that morning, the kind of exam that decided not only tuition but housing, books, and the fragile hope that her life could become something more than survival. She left early, clutching her worn backpack, rehearsing formulas and dates in her head as if repeating them could protect her from failure. Halfway to the bus stop, she saw the motorcycle wreck. A black bike lay twisted like a broken animal, steam rising from its engine, and a man sprawled on the asphalt, leather jacket torn, blood pooling beneath him as cars slowed but did not stop. The patch on his back marked him as a Hell's Angel, a name that made most people look away, but Emily did not. She saw only a human being slipping away, gasping, alone. Her feet froze for 1 second, just long enough for fear to scream inside her head that she would be late, that no one would blame her for walking past, that this was not her responsibility. Then she dropped her bag and ran. She knelt beside him, hands shaking as she pressed her scarf against his wound, using everything she remembered from a first aid class she had taken years ago, counting breaths, begging him silently to stay alive. She waved down traffic, called for help, and stayed even as minutes stretched cruelly on, even as she watched the bus that would have taken her to the exam disappear down the road. When the ambulance finally arrived, she was smeared with blood and trembling from shock, and as paramedics lifted the biker onto a stretcher, she stood there knowing with a heavy, sinking certainty that her chance was gone. Emily arrived at the exam hall too late, the doors already closed, her explanation swallowed by rules that did not bend for compassion. She walked back home under a sky that seemed cruelly bright, every step heavier than the last, calculating what this meant for her future. Without the scholarship, she would likely have to drop out, work full-time, maybe never return. That night she cried quietly into her pillow so her neighbors would not hear, wondering if she had been foolish, wondering if kindness was a luxury people like her could not afford. She went back to work the next day, stacking shelves, pretending everything was normal, though her chest felt hollow. She did not tell anyone what she had done, because there was no one to tell, and because part of her was afraid that if she said it out loud, it would hurt even more. What Emily did not know was that the man she saved was named Michael Reed, a veteran member of the Hells Angels, a man who had lived most of his life believing the world saw him only as a monster, a man who had learned to expect fear or hatred in strangers' eyes. When he woke in the hospital, alive against all odds, he asked why he was still breathing. The nurses told him about the young woman who had stopped, who had missed something important to stay with him, who had refused to leave even when she was shaking with cold and fear. For the first time in years, Michael felt something crack open inside him. He asked for her name, and when he got it, he told his brothers. The next morning, Emily woke to a sound that did not belong in her quiet street, a deep, rolling thunder that made her window vibrate. She pulled back the curtain and felt her breath catch as she saw motorcycles lining the road, chrome and black stretching as far as she could see, men standing beside them in leather vests marked with the unmistakable winged skull. 100 Hells Angels had arrived at her door. Panic flooded her veins as she wondered what she had done wrong, whether helping one of them had somehow put her in danger. Her hands shook as she opened the door, bracing herself for the worst. What she saw instead was something she would remember for the rest of her life. The men stood quietly, hats in their hands, faces solemn. At the front was Michael, pale but standing, his movements careful. He looked at her with eyes full of something she did not expect, gratitude so heavy it seemed to bend him. He explained that she had saved his life, that none of them would forget it, that in a world where people crossed the street to avoid them, she had knelt down and chosen mercy. Then he told her they had come to return what she had lost. They did not give her cash in a dramatic gesture or promise favors whispered in the shadows. Instead, they did something far more powerful. Through connections, persistence, and a surprising respect for education that few outsiders ever saw, they arranged for her exam to be retaken under special circumstances, advocating for her story until it reached ears that could not ignore it. They set up a fund to cover her tuition regardless of the outcome, contributed by men who had known hardship, prison, war, and loss, men who understood what it meant to be given a chance when none should have existed. They stood on her street not as threats, but as witnesses, showing her neighbors and the world that kindness could ripple into places no one expected. Emily took the exam again weeks later, her hands steady this time, her heart full. She passed with a score higher than she had dared to hope for. She continued her studies, graduated, and went on to work in emergency response, choosing a life where stopping to help was not an exception but a calling. She and Michael stayed in touch through letters, their bond a quiet reminder that labels were thin things compared to the weight of human choice. Years later, when Emily spoke to students about resilience, she told them that the most important decision of her life was not made in a classroom, but on a street where she chose not to look away. If this story touched your heart even a little, if it reminded you that doing the right thing matters even when no one is watching, please like this video, share it with someone who needs faith in humanity restored, and subscribe for more stories that prove compassion still exists. Please comment below with the word kindness if you believe one good choice can change everything, and tell us your thoughts before this story ends, because your voice keeps these stories alive. Emily never became famous, and the men who stood outside her door returned to their lives, but something invisible and unbreakable had formed that day, a quiet understanding that the world is shaped not by grand speeches or perfect plans, but by ordinary people who stop, kneel down, and choose to care, even when it costs them everything.